All right, let's get our other Facebook groups on in here before it's officially time to go. Got our spinning wheels going here. 1 and 2. Give it a second to breathe. And welcome in. It is Tuesday night, December 27th, 2022, and it's time for an episode of Building the Broncos. I am Nick Kendell and joined by, once again, Carl Dumler. Carl, it's good to see you. It feels like we haven't been able to link up that much. I know you've been busy, but it's nice to have some normalcy here as we lead into the 2023 season, and nothing more normal than the Broncos once again looking for a new head coach.
Yeah, getting our usual, this is not good enough for the fan base. And, we're going to do a thorough search and then come back. Oh, you know what? We didn't do a thorough search. Sorry about that guy. We've heard a lot of these same lines for a lot of years here. And it's just unfortunate the Broncos haven't been able to get this figured out. And pretty much after last Sunday's game, I think it was pretty obvious. Like, did they really have much other choice than to make this decision? No. It's not only that you lose the game horribly, but lost the sideline, players fighting each other. It was completely out of control. And
Patrick
unfortunately,
Starr.
it's the head coach's responsibility when those things begin to happen. It falls on him. I think Hackett's a good guy, but this isn't the business about good guys. This is about the business of winning. And obviously, he hasn't done a whole lot of that.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think only the third head coach to be outright fired in his first season in the last 3 years. Other guys have gone on to college positions and whatnot at the end of their first year at a gig. So pretty ugly. Obviously, this is not as bad as the Urban Meyer tenure in Jacksonville, but pretty darn bad. And unfortunately, one of the big resounding thoughts across the NFL landscape from who I've been listening to, the big media folks saying, yeah, it's Nathaniel Hackett's out. They kind of had to do this. It had to be the quarterback or Hackett. It's not all Hackett's fault. They can't move on from Russ. So Hackett had to go. So I think a lot of people think it's maybe he's somewhat being scapegoated for this, but it's bad. Somebody had to pay. He was the easiest one to, fall on the sword for that. So we'll see how it looks going forward. And like I said, once again, a new head coaching search in the Denver Broncos. But this time, maybe it's different, Carl. This time, new ownership group and really a different power dynamic going forward that we saw today from the press conference with Penner and Peyton.
Right. I was going to say, I saw somebody talk about how they could give like a 4-year, $25 million a year contract to the next head coach. What guy's going to turn that down? Like, you could be making $100 million guaranteed for the next 4 years. But we got David coming in. Thank you, David. Good to see you around, bud. Hope you had a good holiday. Saying, I think Penner and Peyton do not believe Russell Wilson is fixable. It's just taboo for them to say so publicly. Well, yeah, you just paid the guy $250 million. Well, not really, but that's the maximum of the contract. It won't get up to that. You're kind of stuck with him. I mean, you could pull the Band-Aid and just say, we're just going to have a couple years where our cap is completely screwed. But most likely the next coach is going to be stuck with Russell Wilson for at least probably a year or two. And you're going to have to try to figure out how to work with him. And, this is where I wanted to get into this question at some point when we're talking about this of what qualities are you looking for in your next head coach? Because are you looking for somebody that can pretty much like rein Wilson in and say, hey, you're not all that you think you are. You're no longer having this office anymore. You're just one of the guys in the locker room. Maybe that whole, like, we're going to draft a guy. You're going to compete for your spot. Are you wanting that kind of guy? Or are you wanting a guy that's really close with Wilson, can, has a relationship in some way? Like I said, we can get into that. I don't know if you want to do it right now, but I did want to get to Patrick here saying, afternoon, gents. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. No more Hackett. Woohoo.
Woohoo. And we also got David Wilder coming in. Thank you to both Patrick and David for coming in here. David and David. David Wilder now coming in saying, good evening, Nick, Carl, and Scott in Broncos country. Is there any news on Lauren Landau? Oh, this can, cart before the horse, but let's get into it. Broncos did talk about the injuries that they've had this season. Sounds like it's something they're really going to dig into this offseason to try to figure out. Nothing definitive on Lauren Landau, but I would say that given the comments from the press conference, it wouldn't be surprising at all if he was out in Denver and they brought in somebody else. That's this ownership's decision.
Right. And I think Scott has this clip. Scott, if you want to go ahead and play that for us here, what he kind of talked about with the training staff.
But anyway, while Scott's pulling this up, to David Cromelo's question, there's no way in heck this coaching staff is going to, or excuse me, coaching staff, ownership group, and George Payton are going to throw Russell Wilson under the bus. He's still under contract. They maybe would try to trade him in the offseason, and you lose a lot of leverage if you come out and do that. So you could say that they don't have faith in him getting it together, but he's still here. They're not stupid. They're not going to just completely throw him under the bus. Now you get those guys, off the record, have a few drinks or something, then maybe you find something else there, but not in this sort of presentation at all. That's company line.
For sure.
Nathaniel brought that philosophy over from Green Bay, and they were one of the healthier teams. And so we brought the philosophy here. It didn't work for us. If it was that simple, we would have made a change. We would make the change moving forward. But it's not that simple. It's very complicated. The injuries that we've had, like 4 coaches in 6 years, they've had injuries for the past 6 years. So maybe you're right. Maybe we do need to be callous. Maybe we do need to practice harder. But this has been ongoing in Denver, the injury problems. And we've had a number of head coaches. And it's up to us to fix the problem and do a deep dive in our entire wellness, our training, our strength and conditioning, our nutrition. And so it's a bigger problem than just that. Obviously, every coach we talk to, we're going to discuss how they do it. How do you run practice? How do you see sports science? Catapult, GPS, and everything that's involved. And so there'll be big discussions with all the candidates, and at the same time, Greg, myself, Carrie, we'll be doing a deep dive into our organization and how we can fix things.
Yeah, he gone.
I'm still waiting to see, and that's just because this is the sciences, right? This isn't football watching with their eyes, and I'm not a kinesiologist or anything like that. And it sounds like a lot of people who are in the industry really respect Landau. So maybe they bring something else in here, but I think just because of the new ownership group and everything like that, that they might move on and get their own person in there, even if Landau is qualified. And again, I still take the stance that I think that's more freak occurrence, but they're going to invest in it and research in it. And that's one of the things we've talked about on here many times. How can you win outside of the margins and the peripheries of the salary cap? Investing a bleep ton of money in development, nutrition, training, and even that slight edge in injuries and investing in there and being cutting edge there can make a difference on a season. So hopefully that's something with having the richest owners, you can get the benefits of that.
Right. We got another David coming in here with the $10 super chat. It's the night of David saying, good evening, Broncos country, Nick, Carl, and Deacon Scott. The future is bright. I hope so. I'm a little torn. And you got to hear them kind of talk about how this is all going to go. And it does, like, Penner's very serious.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that guy was like, I think if he could have fire coming out of his eyes, he would have, because he's angry. He's frustrated with how things have gone. And he's like, we're going to get this right. This is not what I invested all this money into to see this kind of product. But
they got embarrassed. They were straight up embarrassed. Like, the product was embarrassing. They're fighting each other on the sideline, and it's this terrible trade, the worst trade in history. They've been the butt of every joke for almost the entire season. It's been an embarrassing team, an embarrassing product, and his name is on that. It's his team. So figure it out. I'd be pissed off too. So sorry to interject. It's just, I get it.
Yeah. And so I do feel like he's really going to invest in this next hire. What does that mean? Like I said, does that mean you throw as much money at this head coach so you can get yourself that big name guy, the Jim Harbaugh, the Sean Payton, which I'm kind of saying, if he's bringing Vic Fangio with him, I doubt Vic Fangio is going to want to be coming to Denver again. Yeah. But, you never know. New ownership, he might be going, hey, this is a whole new situation compared to when I left last time. I don't know if he'd want to deal with the fans again, though. That's a whole nother thing. We've got Phil coming in saying, evening, Nick, Carl, and Deacon Scott. I came away from the presser with thought that Penner made it clear he was running the show. Hashtag go Broncos, hashtag MHH for life. Yeah, there's no question. He's going to be a very hands-on owner. And I think, again, Scott has another clip for this. So we'll see if we can get him coming up with that here pretty quick. But yeah, it's his show. It's his money. I don't blame him. If I'm putting that much money into something, I want to be connected to it as much as I possibly can. And this is, again, where I always loved with Bolin. Like, he was more of a behind the scenes kind of guy, but he still said, hey, I'm going to put as much money as I need to make this good. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you what you
yes,
need.
the new head coach will report to me, which is a more typical structure in the NFL. Obviously, the relationship between the general manager and the head coach is a critical one, and George is going to be intimately involved with this process of looking for a new head coach, and we'll make sure that there's a good fit there.
God, it's just this whole dynamic. George Penner coming out here and saying that the typical structure is that the head coach reports to the owner. I don't feel like that's the typical structure that you see around the NFL. Obviously, he signs the checks at the end of the day, but a lot of times the pecking order is ownership, from then personnel, then down to the coaching staff. They have to work in congruence. Obviously, that's one of the reasons I thought that maybe they would try to run it back next season to have alignment of all of them. If the whole ship sinks, then you move on from all of them, and then you can have the top down, everybody on the same page. Now you have Peyton here for now, but I do think it's pretty interesting hearing him talk about the head coach answering to Penner first and foremost. And that also is something that's a red flag here. It kind of came out, not a red flag, but a light here coming on. We saw it in the release yesterday about Hackett being fired, is that Peyton's kind of conceding some power here to the ownership group. If it's not Peyton leading the charge for the head coach, he's already given up a huge part of what being a general manager is, being the final call on the head coaching staff and what your staff looks like as you build the team and the coaching staff. So I'm curious if that's something that is a sign of things to come. Maybe Peyton's only here temporarily. I mean, it would not be the first time in NFL history that a team keeps a general manager and a front office staff through the draft and then moves on from them after the draft. But you've already seen some concession of power here. And now you have this coming up with the Penner leading it and saying the head coach is going to answer directly to the owner. There's weird power dynamics. We keep talking about the power dynamics in the locker room with Russell Wilson, but it's all the way to the top now.
Yeah. I always remember with Brian Zanders, first year with Elway, he stayed on. And then the next year, Elway was like, nope, yep, you're gone. Now I'm the only guy that speaks here. And I kind of wonder if that might be a little bit this year. But we got Friendly Giant coming in saying, crack the code, guys. Move Wilson to kick returner or tight end. And his contract gets voided when he refuses to play. I think Scott had a comment in there that he'd probably just fake pulls a hamstring and goes on IR, and we're paying him anyway. Yeah. Wilson's smart. Let's not. Obviously, some things that are happening on the field, it's not great or anything like that. But when we're coming to the business side of things, Wilson is very intelligent, and he would know how to make sure he maximizes his money.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously, there's more about this interview today, the press conference with Penner and Peyton. And Peyton, I think, he did, and Penner did what they needed to do, apologize to Broncos country. This has been, we talked about it, an embarrassing season. And what did we have? 20,000 no-shows in this last game against the Cardinals. Granted, it was the Brett Rippon versus Colt McCoy to Trace McSorley. So, but I know Scott has a clip of Peyton and Penner talking about how unacceptable and apologizing to Broncos country today as well. So we'll have Scott pull that up. But any thoughts on that? I mean, does that do anything for you, Carl? Do you give a hoot that they're apologizing? I mean, we all see the product. It's bad. You're saying what everyone's thinking.
Once I see what they're willing to do to make up for this, like, again, are you willing to go out there and do whatever it takes to get a good head coach in here? The Broncos, ESPN was talking about this earlier today, that they are going to be probably the least attractive head coaching job when it comes to everything that they've got right now. When you're just looking at players and obviously have to work with Russell Wilson and all of that, are you willing to say, hey, we're going to do whatever it takes, because we know that's going to be a struggle that we have to get over. So we're going to put the resources ahead. We're going to put the money where our mouth is, or however that saying goes, and make sure that this gets taken care of. Because, if you go out there and hire somebody, here we go.
The competitiveness our team has shown this year, despite the injuries and adversity, is a testament to Nathaniel and his leadership. I believe he will be a successful coach in the future, and we wish him the best. When we purchased this great franchise in August, this was not the season we were expecting, and it has been a season that's disappointing for our fans and what they deserve. Their loyalty and support through these difficult seasons has been incredible. I want to personally apologize to our fans and all of Broncos country. We know that we need to be better, and we will. The Denver Broncos are a proud franchise with a rich history and a winning tradition, As owners, it's incumbent on us to have high expectations, set a high standard, and ensure there is accountability. We talked about that at the beginning of the season. It was true then, and it's true now.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing here, obviously apologizing to the coaching staff, but what stands out to me is having accountability and leadership in here, which seems like something this coaching staff let get away pretty quickly, and the front office is partially to blame for that as well. But I mean, you're right, man. Penner, he's not mad, he's disappointed, but like in the worst kind of angry dad way. So
I don't feel like I've ever seen Peyton, like Paton, George Peyton, so rattled as I did in this press conference. Like, he's usually a very so sure of himself, like very alpha personality when he walks in. This is the first time I felt like he was kind of almost shrinking into the background. And of course, I mean, Penner's the more in charge guy, but I think there were some conversations that were had with Peyton there where he's on some pretty thin ice here. And like I said, he might not even make it to this next season. It might be he makes it through the draft and they say, you know what? Yeah, we're done.
Yeah. I mean, regardless if he's here or not, we've already seen concession of power, and there might be a dynamic here, which we've seen with other teams where, you know, this is going to be the head coaches, this ownership group's head coach coming in here. And let's say that they're both answering to the head coach. Where does the tiebreaker go? I mean, he was top dog here. I mean, with the ownership group in flux and bringing in his own head coach, deciding to keep Fangio, moving on from him, bringing in Hackett, it's Peyton's running the show. Well, now ownership, head coach, Peyton. I mean, heck, maybe even Russell than Peyton. So it's how quickly the dynamic has changed here. And we always knew this would be the case with the ownership group coming in, but didn't expect it to be this off the rails and the concession of power that we've already seen. I mean, I think it sets up for the Broncos to go pretty hard at a head coach that not only wants the money. We talk about this Broncos ownership group being wealthy. They mentioned it in the press conference saying that, you know, this new head coach coming in is going to have every single resource available to them to succeed at the job, but also power. I think there's a chance that you have that kind of structure set up where Peyton and the head coach answer to the general manager, but pecking order is owner, head coach, general manager.
Right. All right. Well, we got David coming in once again. Thank you, David. Saying Broncos are the least desirable head coach destination, mainly because of the Russ situation, but the Colts and Cardinals aren't that much more attractive. There's going to be a lot of weird dynamics because of that quarterback position. I mean, that's always where a head coach starts looking. Do they have the quarterback position figured out, or do they have maybe the draft capital to get that kind of figured out? Obviously, the Broncos right now have neither of those. I mean, I'm not saying Russ is completely broken. Maybe you do have a guy that comes in and, like I said, a Jim Harbaugh, he can bring that power run thing that he has going there at Michigan, that he can really just make that the identity of the offense, have your quarterback running a lot of those play action passes, what he was doing in Seattle to a lot of success. And I think he's one of the big personalities that can make that happen, and where everybody else is going, yeah, we're on board with this. And Russell Wilson's just going to have to kind of fall in line. So I think you can still make it work with Russell. It's just a matter of you've got to get that right head coach that can rein him in from everything that he's gotten. And that's the hard part. It's kind of, I remember my dad was a teacher for a while, and he said, how you establish yourself day one decides how the rest of the classroom is going to go the rest of the year. So if you are tough day one, you can ease up as the year goes on. But if you are easy on day one, it is really hard to get tougher as the year goes on. And unfortunately, the Broncos pretty much said, Russ, hey, you have complete reign over the entire classroom. Have fun. And now they're going, uh-oh, what did we do?
Yeah, and Phil coming in here saying, I'm curious, do most quarterbacks have their own office and staff? Seems to me I would want to be with my team in the locker room. I feel like a lot of quarterbacks have their own personal staff, a lot of the upper tier ones. Now they're not getting the reign of the locker room and facilities at the team, but, you know, off-season stuff, extra work that they're getting in there. I mean, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, they've all had personal coaches and nutrition and staff and everything like that. But as far as the own office and the level of concessions and free reign that this Russell Wilson team around him has had seems somewhat unprecedented. Now, granted, I'm too close to the situation. I haven't taken stock of every single quarterback situation in the league, but it does seem pretty wild.
Yeah, we got Garth Knight coming in with a super chat saying, "Shoot me straight, Carl and Nick.
Oh,
Give me the percentage chances Russ can be fixed. I hope it's over 50."
the issue with this is that fixed to me sounds very binary, where the outcomes of Russell Wilson going forward are much more ordinal. Are we talking, is fixed being a top 5 quarterback, a top 10 quarterback that you're paying for? Is fixed being a league average quarterback, which he was far from this year? I mean, if we did like baseball stats, Wilson was probably a negative WAR player for the quarterback position, which is just wild to say, but I mean, it just is what it is, I guess. So I think Russell Wilson being fixed to the extent that he's worth the trade the Broncos made and the contract they gave him, 2 and 100, 3 and 100. Russell Wilson being
3%.
a solid, yeah, I mean, not great. Russell Wilson being a viable starting quarterback in the league with put the contract in a box. Let's just forget about that for a second. Being a viable quarterback, I think that's probably closer to 50-50, but being the level of quarterback needed to justify the trade and the contract, I don't know. I don't see it. And I've been wrong. I hope I'm wrong because Russell Wilson seems, I mean, for all the corniness and stuff, seems like he's a good person. He's got his heart in the right place, working with the children, good father and everything like that. But I don't know. Everything I saw this year and the trends right now are screaming, sell. I would not be buying in on Wilson stock.
Well, it's hard. He's got to work to build back up the locker room towards himself too. It's not just the play on the field. It's winning back his teammates. Because there's a lot of guys that really don't want a whole lot to do with him. It kind of sounds like the Brett Rippon situation that happened on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. That was Russell sending him over to go talk to him about something. And Rip kind of being the messenger. And it was more like Rip getting the blowback from what should have been happening towards Wilson in that moment.
Yeah.
And it's kind of bringing back a little bit of the, like 2016, 2017 Broncos, when you started seeing the defense really frustrated with what was going on with the offense and pretty much just telling the offense, like, you need to shut up because you have no room to be able to talk in this team. Like, until you start doing anything on the field, we're not going to listen to you. Yeah. And so again, he's got to win back so much more than just his play on the field. It's got to be that locker room too. Now, playing good on the field helps in that cause.
Oh, yes.
People will put up with a lot when you can make plays on the field, but it's still a matter of, like I said, there's so much more to this.
Yep. There is so much to that. And actually we had Penner and Peyton asked today about fixing Russell Wilson, salvaging that contract and potentially, not being in this position next year where the Broncos are going to have to face a really tough decision of the post June 1st cap cut or versus keeping Wilson. So let's hear what Penner and Peyton had to say on that. But as far as fixability goes, I think the question is, as far as can he be a viable NFL starting quarterback? Yes, I think so. Closer to average, but can he be that top 10 franchise changer, guy who drives the car worthy of that massive contract? I don't know. I would not bet on it right now, which sucks. It sucks.
Yeah. Just
well, Mike, we saw flashes of Russ this year. Russ even said he didn't play up to his standard, but the first half of the Chargers game, the first half of the Raiders game, he finished strong. So you can go through the season that you do see flashes, and he'll be the first one to tell you he didn't play up to his standard, didn't play up to our standard. He needs to be better. I don't think we made a coaching move based on Russ. That wasn't what it's all about. That's not why we're getting a new coach to turn around Russ. It's about the entire organization. It's about the entire football team. It's just not one player. It's not whether Russ is fixable or not. We do believe he is. We do.
Decision to have Russell here was a long-term one.
Yeah. Interesting things here. They think Russ is fixable. Yes. The quarterback, the head coaching decision is not one that is paired with correcting Russell Wilson. It's about the overall team, the backup quarterbacks, the rest of the staff here, special teams, I think they mentioned as well. So, again, not talking out of both sides of your mouth, but both can be true, but they want to fix Russ, but the head coaching hire is not dependent on fixing Russ. And let me tell you, if they were planning on keeping Russell Wilson here for the duration of this contract, the only way that's happening with this next head coaching hire and this front office is if they do fix Russ, obviously. So
Yep.
I don't know. It really seems like they are setting themselves up for as soft of a landing as you can getting out of this contract after next season. Now, granted, it's like both your parachutes failed and you're trying to, instead of straight head down, you're trying to spray yourself out. I think, did you ever watch King of the Hill? Like
Yeah.
Peggy Hill falls and
but she
survives,
fell.
but the parachute didn't come out.
Yep.
Everything's going to break. Like we're going to be in trouble for a couple of years here, but hopefully we're not going to die. And I think that's kind of what, I mean, they talk about, we're not, Russell Wilson doesn't have anything to do with this head coaching hire. We need to get the best guy in here for the team. That's distancing yourself from this a bit, in my opinion.
Right. Well, and I think it is when you're talking to that coach and you're telling them, hey, we are going to give you the time. Like, we're not going to make it where you have to turn around Russell Wilson. We're going to give you that 2 years, 3 years to get you the resources and to rebuild up this roster and get you your guy at quarterback, all those kind of things. So, I mean, you would hope that they'd give the next coach enough time. If this is the owner's guy, I think they're going to be stuck in here for a little bit. I think that was part of the problem these last few years. One, you had Kubiak's health issues that kind of played into him having to leave the Broncos. But then, the next couple, there was so much turmoil in the front office with Elway, with the ownership group, with, who's going to be in charge, all those kind of things. And it showed up in the coaching staff too. And so just all that turmoil of getting guys turned over. So I feel like now that is settled, the ownership is settled, they're hiring their guy. I think they are going to give this guy 2 to 3 years to get this thing turned around.
Yeah, and they need to be able to sell that as a post Russell Wilson. Let's say he's not this coach's guy, right, coming in here. And it's going to be a harder sell. Granted, you can throw money at it, but if you have to fix Russ, then you might limit yourself some. So you asked me earlier, what was the one thing I was looking for with a new head coaching hire here? And it's something that we've seen it come up a few times here. And I wanted to give credit to Albert Breer here. He over at Sports Illustrated mentioning this quote that really stood out to me, saying the one thing that this ownership group and this team needs at the head coach is the next guy has to have the leverage and ability to stand up to Russell Wilson. Obviously, we've talked about it on here a good bit, and I've few sources who have said that, this coaching staff has been one of the least empowered of recent memory as far as running what they want to run versus what the quarterback is wanting to run. And it sounds like Russell got what he wanted this year, and it had not worked pretty well. Still, Hackett falling on the sword here, and he deserved to be fired for that. But having a coach with enough credibility and just, not too nice. You need an adult in the room, not a buddy. This coach needs to come in and be like, listen, I got enough friends here. I'm your coach. I don't need to be your friend. I'm here to be your coach. So I think that one really stood out to me. The next guy who comes in has to have the leverage to stand up to Wilson. I mean, that coming from Albert Breer, that means something. That's not just some, hoopla. That's not just me making something up. I mean, this is a trend coming around multiple bigwig NFL reporters now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that has to be a huge part of this. I mean, you look at all those years with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Like, Belichick had no problem telling Tom Brady, hey, you messed up here. You did this wrong. No, we're not going to do this. And I think part of when, I guess, lack of better words, divorce that ended up happening was because Tom Brady was like, okay, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of not having the power in this relationship. And he kind of felt like he had earned it. And I think Wilson kind of came in here thinking, hey, I've earned it. I've earned to have that right to be able to say what I want to say and do what I want to do. And we're just seeing the difference between greatest of all time and Tom Brady. And I hate saying that, to Russell Wilson, he's a great he's good to great quarterback, but he's not one of those guys that should have that kind of power within the room. We've got David coming in again, man. Like I said, it's just the night of the Davids, saying the contract extension will always be a negative mark on Peyton, in my opinion.
I mean, it's who do we trust here? There's some people in Denver reports saying that the deal was not part of the trade beforehand, and then you have people, I think it was George Stoya back in March when this trade went down, saying that this deal was being worked on and the structure of it was being worked on back during the owners' meeting, well before the trade went through. So conflicting reports here from different people here, probably depending on who's feeding information to the other one. So I think that the extension was probably always going to be part of the trade for Russell Wilson to approve the no trade clause and come out here. In hindsight, probably good. Would have been better to not have that extension on top of the trade, but I just don't think the trade is happening without the extension. The one thing that made it a hold up was the exchange of money that occurred with the ownership group changing. And again, more recent reports had been that the extension was not part of the trade. But then you have reports back to when this wasn't so ugly at the time, when everybody was excited about the trade, that this is the deal and the structure of the contract had been working on for months, even before the trade happened.
Yeah. We got Garth Knight coming in with a really good question here saying, okay, Nick and Carl, give me the percentages. My pipe dream comes true and we get Jim Harbaugh.
I think there's more of a chance than I thought a little bit ago. And I think the biggest reason I'm coming around to this is that this Penner group seems they're impatient and they are going to throw money at it. George Paton has not been outright fired, but has been demoted in terms of power, which was one of the big reasons I thought that Jim Harbaugh wouldn't come here. It's because I think he wants final say of roster control. And I didn't think that would happen unless Paton got the boot as well. Well, Paton's already not leading the coaching search. So who's to say Paton's going to have final say over the roster decisions? I think that's less likely today than it was before. And the other one here with Jim Harbaugh is that, oh God, I had another point about Jim Harbaugh. I think it's certainly possible. And also I've been told that the Broncos want to make a big name splash. You're not getting a big name splash bringing in Dan Quinn. You're not getting a big name splash bringing in Frank Reich. Sean Payton doesn't sound like he wants to come here. A lot of things point to Jim Harbaugh in that case.
Yeah. And you do have some connections between ownership and Jim Harbaugh. I think Condoleezza Rice is very connected to Stanford and everything that was going on even back then when Jim Harbaugh was there. And so I think there's a better chance than people realize on this one. Now, let me ask you this question. Does it help or hurt the Broncos' cause by him winning or losing a championship?
Say that one more time. Does it
so
help?
Since he's in the playoffs right now, Jim Harbaugh, if they win the national championship, does that help the Broncos' cause? Because he's going, hey, I've made it to the top of college football. Let me go do it in the NFL now. Or does it hurt? Or he's like, hey, look at this, man. I've got a free ride in college from now on after winning the national championship. Why would I give this up?
I think that he's interviewed for multiple positions over the last couple of years in the NFL, so he's not doing that unless he has at least some interest in coming to the league. I mean, he was very close to the Minnesota job last year. And I think that if they lose a close one to Georgia or Ohio State in the national championship, then I think it's possible that he would return, being that close to the pinnacle. But let's say they lose to TCU or get absolutely blown out by Georgia in the championship, then could make that jump. Different ability to in the recruiting bases out in those spots. I know it's the game's changing with the transfer portal and the NIL, but that's the other thing. And I've said on here, Michigan fans, come at me about it, which fine. I mean, just stating my opinion. You can state yours too, but college football has become so vastly different over the last few seasons. And it's going to accelerate that way because not only are you having to recruit these high school players, you're having to recruit the guys in the transfer portal coming in. You're having to re-recruit your own guys. There is absolutely no offseason to this. And then you have to go out there and you have to go, be the front man for collectives, donate to our collectives because the university can't pay guys, but we need the boosters to pay both for the coaches' salaries, the facilities, and now the collectives, not from the university, to pay the players. I mean, it's such a massive job and demand to be a college head coach where it's getting further and further away from coaching in football to, campaigning out here. So would be really interesting to see if that happen. Maybe he's not as interested in the current landscape of football. I mean, we won't know until we know, but again, was out there a couple years ago for the Raiders position, out there last year for the Vikings position. This isn't coming out of nowhere, right? There's been interviews.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, obviously I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope the Broncos could land him. I think he's I think he would be great for what the Broncos need right now. Long term, I have some questions just because I do feel like at times he does wear out his welcome. Just because he's that crass personality. Mm-hmm. He is a little bit tougher to always get along with. And so I could see him rubbing some guys the wrong way, even if he is winning at It's kind of when he left the 49ers.
Yeah.
There's a lot of animosity that kind of came with that. And so
there was a weird power dynamic there, though, with the general manager,
Yeah.
Balky and Harbaugh wanted more power because he took him to, 3 NFC championship games in 4 years and a Super Bowl appearance. And Balky's like, well, I was the general manager during that. Why would we give you more say and power? And that led to a weird dynamic there. I know there was also the weird incident where Peyton Manning was a free agent and they got into the throwing the football competition. I mean, do you remember that story? I mean, just some weird stuff with Harbaugh. I mean, he's a different dude. But that I joked almost a month ago now that the only person that can come in here and out cornball Russell Wilson might be Jim Harbaugh, take back power and a display of dominance in the locker room. But I mean, God, what can you say about Harbaugh? He's been a winner. He's won everywhere he's gone. And something that caught my eye today, or my ear as well, talked about the identity on this Broncos offense, specifically the offense not having any sort of identity. We're out here button mashing offensively. Everywhere Harbaugh's gone, there has been a very tough, very physical, very disciplined power element and identity that the team has been able to play off of. Obviously, he's embraced a little bit more spread concepts in college, although he's gotten a little bit more back to his power base, and it's worked pretty well for Michigan these last 2 seasons.
Right.
But yeah, I think he's far and away the slam dunk pick in this one. And the one reason also that I'm much more on Harbaugh than I am on Sean Payton, we've seen Harbaugh done it everywhere and without the Hall of Fame quarterbacks. What did Sean Payton look like without Drew Brees? And the other thing is you don't have to give up any draft picks. This is not a Broncos team that can afford giving up draft picks right now. I mean, are you serious? All you have to do is throw money at him to get him out here and give some power to him. Heck, ownership, give him, a 2% stake in the team. That's more than anybody ever has. I think that he's the pipe dream, but I think it's more realistic today after listening to this press conference than I could have even believed 24 hours ago. And especially a month ago when I was saying, oh, go after Harbaugh, but I didn't think there was any way in heck that it was going to happen.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. And like I said, when they can throw that contract, just say, hey, we're going to give you a blank check. We're going to turn our eyes and whatever you want to put on there, you put on there. And they're going to be fine with that. Because again, when they can get that big signing and it gets them back into the national recognition around the world, that's what they want. Like I said, they've become the laughing stock of football right now. And they're going to do whatever it takes to get away from that. So it'll be interesting. I hate this because last year we were all excited about the coaching search and who they're going to hire. And, obviously the trade for Russ Wilson. And we're just like, okay, now we've got this all figured out. We've got ownership. We've got the coach. We've got the quarterback. And now we're kind of like, crap. We're still right back where we were almost. We've got the ownership, I guess. So I guess we got one thing that's good.
Yeah, 100%. And talking about the ownership, so we're kind of, excited because we have owners with the deep pockets and they're going to come in here and they seemed ticked off, validating our irritation and ire that we've had this season. Do you have any concerns coming out of this press conference today where it's like, okay, yeah, even Penner said in this one, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm not patient. I'm not going to be patient. Stepping forward, taking away some responsibilities, getting more involved, even though he's definitely not a football lifer or a football expert. I mean, those are things that in the background, somewhat red flags. Right now we're cheering for it because we're angry as well and we want change. And, the fact that they, again, can toss money at a problem to fix it is amazing because not every team can say that. But definitely some things that, we look back at it 10 years from now is like, oh, here were the signs, over involvement, turning things over way too quickly, just concerns in that regard. And I think I'd rather have that than have poor, apathetic ownership that's looking to squeeze every penny out of your team. But still, some concerns. At first, Gina coming in saying, need to take that alpha dog mentality away from Russ, especially if we, as the Denver Broncos, are going to be stuck with him for a while. Otherwise, not going to lie, I can see him causing issues with his teammates in the locker room. Like, come on, let's not forget what went down in Seattle, too. I mean, there's already reported issues in the Broncos locker room. He's still their quarterback. It's not, they're not fighting each other to my knowledge, but some of the shtick when you're playing this poorly, it gets pretty tired. And also, I don't know if there's some self-actualization. I just don't know if he realizes, I couldn't be the problem. I'm, Russell Wilson. I'm going to play 10 personnel, 5 wide, and throw it around the yard every time. I'm Drew Brees.
Yeah.
No, you're not Drew Brees. That's not your play style. But definitely a concern. I do want to add, I don't think the long-term thing is as definite as some people make it out. I know that some of the NFL media have been pointing out that the Broncos could move on from him after this offseason.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. But the date that I keep coming back to is that post June 1st designation for 2024. It's expensive, but it's one that seems things are pointing at it right now as if next year doesn't improve seismically.
And you can make it work if you have a quarterback on a rookie contract that you're replacing him with. I mean, it's still like you're paying, a veteran quarterback, because you are essentially. So that hurts, and you need that rookie to play at that veteran top 10 level. But you can get out of it. I mean, it's kind of like what the Bears have been doing with Justin Fields of trying to get their cap situation under control. And so they were kind of setting up for years 3 and 4 of his contract, of his rookie contract. And so that's what the Broncos have to try to do a little bit of. But yeah, I'm with you a little bit on the ownership, being a little bit nervous about that. I mean, you got Jerry Jones down there with the Cowboys. Something that's kind of helped them is he finally got a second voice that he has to kind of listen to, his own son. That it's one of the few times that he's actually going, okay, yeah, this person has some power. I'll listen to him. Mm-hmm. And the one thing I like with Pinner is it's not just him and the ownership. Like, he's not just the end all be all. You've got these other people that they've brought into the ownership group that have a voice. And some of them even have some experience within the sports world itself. I mean, Condoleezza Rice has done some coaching searches before, so this isn't anything new to her. I'm trying to think of the race. Is he a race car driver?
Yes.
Shoot, I'm forgetting his name.
Formula One.
Yeah, Italian. Formula One driver. So, like, again, they've been in some of these sports worlds. They understand it a little bit, and they're going to be a part of this search. It's not just going to be Pinner in the room. And so I hope that that's going to be what we see here. I am worried a little bit that they might get a little bit too excited about some of these good interviews. Like Hackett, again, he's one of those guys. He interviews well. He's a great personality. We saw it the first time he did an interview, and he's just big smiles and big energy and all these kind of things. And Lewis Hamilton, there we go. Thank you, William. I appreciate that. Just went out of the top of my head there for a second. But yeah, it's one of those things. I hope that they just don't fall in love with the personality, and they look at it and say, okay, what's the overall picture that we get with this person? What are they really bringing in for the coaching staff? Are they really bringing in a good offensive coordinator, a great defense coordinator, where they can be more of the true, kind of overall CEO kind of guy? I'm not saying they have to do that. I mean, if there is a guy that's a great offensive mind and, the Kyle Shanahans, the Sean McVays, those kind of guys, I get that of why you don't want to give up that kind of control. Yeah. But we saw with Hackett this year, he was just overwhelmed. The guy just was not quite ready. And it showed, especially early in the season, just a lot of really head-scratching moves that cost you quite a few games there early on. Yeah. And so, again, as bad as Russell Wilson has been, Hackett did deserve to be fired because he did some things that you're just like, no. A beginning person like you and I sitting here, I get it. Like, he's in the moment. He's got like 30 seconds to make real quick decisions. Not even that, maybe 10 seconds. But still, hey, let's go out there and kick a 65-yard field goal that's never been done before. Yay. No.
Yeah. I mean, that one in hindsight maybe looks a little better because, like, oh, you had Russell Wilson here. Why wouldn't you go for a 4th and 8? Well, maybe Russell Wilson's not that great at football. We had a better chance with the coach here, but we have Scott showing here. We have a wave that we had today that we probably do got to talk about as well. Michael Ojemudia, former Iowa Hawkeye, everyone. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Sad for me. But Michael Ojemudia waived out of Broncos now. That 2020 draft class looking utterly abysmal right now. And we'll just run through some of the first names here. Jerry Jeudy. He's fine. He's playing well. He's been playing better down the stretch here. You hope that he wants to stick around here next year because he's definitely a dynamic get open player. And I don't know if he's a good number 1, but you need 3 good wide receivers, and he can definitely be a solid number 2. And then also you have KJ Hamler. Sounds like he might not be back. Dealt with injuries. You had then Lloyd Cushenberry. Wolf, been one of the worst centers in the league, went out there. Then you had Michael Ojemudia. Injuries derailed him. Seems like a really nice kid, but out. He's been waived, hasn't been cut. And then you had in the 3rd round there also McTelvin Agim, also waived. So 5 picks in the top 100, 1 out of 5. Not great.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of been the the rub for the Broncos lately is a lot of what you think. Like, I mean, they look like pretty decent classes coming out, and sometimes they show a little bit of potential. I mean, when we were looking at that class after their rookie year, Jerry Jeudy, other than the drops, his rookie year, looked like a very promising player. Ojemudia, a lot of up and down, but looking like a guy, hey, he could really develop into a nice number 2 kind of cornerback for you. At least a really good depth piece. Hasn't worked out. Lloyd Cushenberry, you're like, okay, he's got to improve. And it's been slight improvements. I'm trying to be nice here. And, obviously KJ Hamler, again, he's had the flashes, but the injuries just completely derail it. And so you look at this class, and some of it's kind of a what could have been. Some of these guys stayed healthy. What could have been with this class? We could have been looking at some of the more dynamic weapons for this offense moving forward, and it just hasn't played out that way.
It has not, but definitely a big bummer going forward there with Michael Ojemudia in that draft class. And one of the reasons the Broncos are where they are when you miss a draft class that much, it hurts. And I see a lot of questions here about Russell Wilson and like trading for a quarterback or going to get a quarterback here. I see a lot of Hendon Hooker conversation as well. Where are you at right now? I know we're months away from the draft still, so we don't have our grades sorted out or anything like that. But I will say for me personally, I am not interested in taking a quarterback early in this draft class unless somebody I love falls to you in let's say the 28th pick from the 49ers. I will say I'm very, very, and just God, it's hook, line, and sinker for me. But the athletic traits of Anthony Richardson, I mean, he looks like Cam Newton out there when he's at his peak. Don't think he's as good of a, this is crazy to say, not as good of a thrower coming out right now as Cam Newton was. There's a lot more, ball sailing, kind of some erratic mechanics, but when it's right for him, it's unbelievably beautiful. If he has, any sort of work ethic or intelligence, then that's a guy that I would bet on just because of his athletic traits. But other than that, I think the quarterbacks you're talking about here for the Broncos next year, outside of Russell Wilson, this might want some people to plug their ears, but like a Jacoby Brissett out there, that kind of guy, maybe an Andy Dalton, maybe a Baker Mayfield, somebody who's a solid number 2 quarterback. But I don't see the Broncos investing early in the draft on a quarterback this season.
Yeah. I mean, I do like there are some pretty decently athletic quarterbacks in this draft that at least have that to fall back on when they're still figuring out, how to read a defense and how to play at the NFL level, all those kind of things. I guess how much do you factor in Will Levis kind of having a fall off this year to Scangarello? Because a lot of people are kind of going, this is that next guy that could really emerge. And then we saw that drop off.
I think it's a little bit of everything with Levis this year. I think it's Levis.
Sorry.
But he lost three players to the NFL this season. And Wendell Robinson, that Kentucky receiving core was horrible. And they lost, I think, 3 of their top offensive linemen as well. So it was definitely a struggling year for him, but I don't know. I don't trust him that much. I kind of have all these quarterbacks at the top, even, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud in a bucket. And I might want to take the last one standing with those top 4 and might lean with the guy with the biggest tools in Anthony Richardson. But I personally wouldn't take any of the quarterbacks for the Broncos. I wouldn't be looking to take a quarterback in the first round. I see a lot of Hendon Hooker conversation on here as well. If we're talking maybe 3rd round, maybe I take a swing on Hendon Hooker. I don't think he's a first-round caliber quarterback. He's going to be 25 years old. He's a solid athlete with a solid arm and very good at protecting the football, but that Josh Heupel offense is make-believe as far as the NFL concepts and throws. And you can get suckered by the down-the-field throws with him, which we saw, hey, who was Drew Lock's offensive coordinator, his best season? Current Tennessee head coach Josh Heupel. There's just not a lot of NFL concepts on tape. There's a lot of vertical routes and spacing that you can get in college that you don't get in the NFL because the hash marks are much closer together. They don't replicate it like that. So be okay with Hooker in 3rd round, but I'm not looking to trade down and take him in the 2nd or take him with the 1st round pick.
Yeah. All right. We got Gina coming back in saying, once again, appreciate you guys coming on and being with us here tonight to chat and talk about the latest news and updates in Broncos country. Hey, we appreciate you being in here. It's, I'll be honest, it has been hard to want to watch the Broncos because it is such a horrible product and just such a depressing thing. I'll be honest. I did not watch much of the game live. We were in the middle of opening presents that day with my wife's family. And my wife's like, hey, you know what? Kids are playing with their presents in between opening everything. You can watch the game while we open presents. I watched 5 minutes and the game was already out of control. And I was like, oh, you know what? Nope. This is depressing me from something that should be fun. Obviously, like, that. And so, like I said, I just appreciate you all being here. And I think it's still going to be a great offseason. I think it's going to be a fun one. Broncos obviously got that first round pick back. Coaching search is going to be happening. So there is going to be a lot of information, and you guys are going to be wanting to tune in every night here to Mile High Huddle. And especially Tuesday nights with us. It's going to be a good time. And so we're still trying to build up this team. Ever since you and I started this, we've been trying to build a good Broncos team, and we've not seen the Broncos do it. I feel like you and I've done some pretty good with some of the players that we've picked over the years. Yeah. I mean, I'm still messed up on my Paxton Lynch pick and my Forrest Lamp. That's my other big one that I was like pounding the table, like, you got to take this guy. And then he didn't turn into anything.
I'm an idiot. I like Josh Rosen, so nobody listen to anything I have to say ever. I'm not the only one there. There's a lot of us idiots out there. There are dozens of us, but no. Finally, we should talk about this a little bit. We talked a lot about Jim Harbaugh. Are there any other head coaches out there that really intrigue you in this cycle early on? Obviously, we know a lot of the names at this point. We're going to know a lot more going forward. I know a lot of people are screaming for an experienced head coach. I don't know if I see the person with enough authority and ass-kicking ability in the experience realm that can put that Russell Wilson genie back in the bottle. But is there anybody who stands out for you outside of Jim Harbaugh right now? Am I correct in my assumption that Jim Harbaugh is both of our number one realistic choice? Okay.
Right. I mean, he makes the most sense. Like I said, big name. I think he can bring that power dynamic you need. And the tiebreaker between him and Sean Payton would obviously be the trade.
Yeah.
Not having to give up anything would be incredible.
Besides money, but there's plenty of that in the
they can throw money like crazy. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's all fake anyway, right? Yeah. It's not a huge name, and I go back and forth on this one. He's had a lot of success other than when Peyton Manning went down with injury. Jim Caldwell.
Okay.
I feel like he's a pretty calming voice. He's a very disciplined guy. I think a lot of players would respect him coming in. I mean, again, he's got a winning record in the NFL, had a lot of success with some different guys. And really that only losing season was that year where Peyton Manning went down, and the Colts were pretty much like, yeah, we're just going to lose because.
I mean, he took the bleeping Detroit Lions to the playoffs and had like a 10-win season. And I think they won the NFC North. Now he's been out of the league for a few years now, but Jim Caldwell got shafted with that Lions fire, and they brought in Matt Patricia, I think, behind him. I mean, that they deserved to tank for a bit after that one.
Yeah. So that's one guy that kind of intrigues me. That, like I said, I feel like he'd be a little bit of the John Fox. When he came in, the Broncos were just in complete chaos, and he was kind of that nice, calming voice, very veteran guy that knew how to get everything back under control. And I feel like Jim Caldwell could be the same. I don't know about winning a Super Bowl per se, but right now I'm just trying to get a team that looks competent again. Unfortunately, that's kind of the standard right now of what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Yep. And Gary Palmer, he's the standard in here. $9.99 Super saying, hey, Nick, Carl, and Scott, I feel better knowing Hackett is gone. Go Broncos. Well, I'm glad you feel better, Gary. A lot of work to do here, and we're not going anywhere. We'll keep analyzing and hanging out with you guys and answering questions and giving you guys our opinion on what's going on here. And Carl, don't let Eric know this one, but Jim Caldwell, do you know where he went to school?
Did he go to Iowa?
Defensive back, 4-year starter at the University of Iowa. So
there you go.
In the 70s. So I'm not going to fight it. But
do you have a second name?
I think my second name is probably going to be the second most sought after coach this cycle. And that is DeMeco Ryans. I think that DeMeco Ryans, I mean, people just absolutely rave about his intelligence and how the players listen to him. I mean, I don't know how much 49ers football you've watched this season, and I know that Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of credit, but the way this team run fits, their layering and zone coverage, their tackling, their tenacity, and it trickles down not only from the defense, but the defensive players that are on special teams. I mean, I think this is the most likely guy you're going to get being a Mike Vrabel-esque coach, as we've seen the last few cycles. And I think he brings an element of professionalism. Doesn't have the experience, the skin's on the wall, but also I think that he's intimidating, smart, and a motivator enough that guys will fight for him. And if there's any sort of issue with power dynamics in there, he's going to be the one that's getting it done. He's going to do what he needs to. So I really like D'Amico Ryans. He might not be the coach in Denver, but I think he is a heck of a good option there. And I'd be ecstatic to get him. I know that, defensive coordinator, first-time head coach, blah, blah, blah. Well, Bill Belichick was a defensive head coach. He's a retread, but who's the one in Buffalo right now? Sean McDermott, defensive head coach. Really, I mean, just get a good coach in there that puts people in the position to succeed, and then get the quarterback right on the other end. That's how you're cooking. It doesn't matter if they're offensive or defense, special. I mean, John Harbaugh was a special teams coach for the Eagles before going over to the Ravens.
Yep.
Get a good guy in there.
We got Jeff saying, what has Sean Payton won even with Breeze? Well, he won a Super Bowl. So that's pretty good. I would agree. I think maybe Sean Payton gets a little bit extra hyped because, I mean, Drew Brees was a Hall of Fame quarterback and did a lot of great things and just ran that offense just perfectly. That's not what's going to be here. And so I do wonder a little bit of that fit of what Sean Payton would look like with like a Russell Wilson. If you don't get that perfect quarterback that runs his system, how's that going to work? So I would be a little cautionary about Sean Payton. And I get why he retired. And I mean, Sean McVay's kind of doing the same thing of just needing a year to get away from things. But there's a lot of black cloud that kind of follows Sean Payton. Mm-hmm. You got Bounty Gate that happened there. You just got some other little things that just didn't quite sit right with me. And I kind of wonder what that would look like. And I say that, and then I've heard some people talk about where like Bill Belichick's not exactly happy in New England. Yeah. And that there's a chance he'd maybe say, hey, I want out of New England. And I mean, I'd love to have Bill Belichick here. Who wouldn't? But
I mean, hell, if we're in fantasy land, maybe Mike Tomlin becomes available. I mean, he hasn't had a losing season in 15 years. Granted, a defensive coach. Okay. First time when he was hired, he had a Hall of Fame quarterback for a number of years. That makes the biggest difference. So Garth Knight coming in here saying, I'm with you, Carl. Jim Caldwell is my second behind Harbaugh. I just worry he's been away from the game too long. And what could his coaching, what is his coaching connections like? I'm not sure, but we'll see. And he says he's warming up to D'Amico Ryans or Jared Mayo. I saw that the leader of whoever sponsors the Broncos Stadium, whose name's escaping me right now, said that Jared Mayo would be his choice for the Broncos on Twitter or something like that. And I wouldn't be against it. He seems like a really intelligent, up and coming coach, and also another person that demands respect. Doesn't want to be your friend. It's like, listen, this is the law here, and if you don't like it, you're going to run wind sprints, which this team desperately seems they need right now. But final one I'll talk about, and talk about it very much. Frank Reich. Obviously, probably not the most exciting pick, but he does have a long coaching tree as well. A lot of guys that have worked with him and worked under him, and former offensive coach. He's worked with a number of subpar quarterbacks and maximized them. Obviously, things fell off this season, but the whole Wentz, Irsay, Reich power dynamic thing there in Indy was ugly. But so that's one to keep in mind. The other thing here is, with Reich, obviously, he's gotten different offenses without, elite perimeter talent, without elite quarterback talent, playing well. And he has a connection to a quarterback that maybe the Broncos would bring in to not compete, like soft compete with Russell Wilson, and go to him if things fall off, to protect themselves from the injury guarantees on that contract, in Jacoby Brissett, who had a good couple seasons there in Indy with the Colts. So another name to keep in mind. I know a lot of people talk Dan Quinn, Frank Reich. That seems like the underwhelming ho-hum options in comparison, but I think I'd rather have Frank Reich than Dan Quinn, personally speaking.
Yeah. All right. We got Ted Wunderlich coming in with the $4.99 super chat saying, I want Harbaugh. I don't mind the wear everyone out after 4 years thing, because Russ only has a few years left anyway. Let's maximize them. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my guess is, unfortunately, that dynamic would come to a head of who are you going to keep? A little bit of what happened in Seattle, of where they're going to keep their coach, or where they're going to keep Russell Wilson. One of them had to go. And so obviously I think Harbaugh would win that battle here in Denver. If he's the owner's pick, they're going to keep him, unless things are really falling off with the head coach and they're having a lot of fights in their weekly meetings that they're getting together for. But I don't know. I think Jim Harbaugh, I think he would be perfect for Russell Wilson. I don't think Russell Wilson would like it.
Yeah.
But I think it could be what actually saves his career if he actually would take to what Jim Harbaugh has to bring to the table.
It seems like we're the guy who wants him. And why not Reich, a former NFL quarterback? Just because of how the dynamics went down in Indy, seemed like he kind of got bullied a bit with Wentz and ownership stuff. And you need somebody who can come in and, as Albert Breer said in the thing, stand up and put Wilson in his place, essentially. And I don't know if Reich is that guy. I also don't know if Dan Quinn is that guy either. A backwards hat wearing, one of the guys in the locker room, Dan Quinn. Fine coach. I just don't know if he's the right guy for this job right now. Also, know a lot of people keep pointing at, is it Darrell Bevell? He's a offensive coach with the Cowboys right now. Obviously worked with Russell Wilson in Seattle some good years. Doesn't sound like that ended in the best situation with Bevell getting, I don't think he was fired, but Wilson stuck around and Bevell did not, despite Wilson having some good seasons. Maybe, again, a little bit of a dichotomy between the ideal quarterback who Russell Wilson wants to be versus the quarterback Russell Wilson is at his best self on the field, directly clashing into each other.
And I've seen some people trying to say, well, in the comments about how Drew Brees was under 6 foot or right at 6 foot or whatever, and he made it work. And I know Russell Wilson wants to be Drew Brees, but they're such different quarterbacks. Drew Brees had that quick release, had that ability to really understand this is where my player is going to be. I'm going to throw it to this spot, and I'm going to trust that my player is going to be there. Wilson's kind of a see guy, throw football at that guy. He needs to see him. He just doesn't trust if he can't see it. And that just won't work with that kind of style. Because, Drew Brees, he did fine being able to hit over the middle when he needed to. Obviously, he did a lot of the outside throws. But again, his was all about timing. Russell Wilson is just not a timing quarterback.
Yep. And we see it every week. It's the quick pass game for Russell Wilson is terrible. The accuracy, the placement, throwing guys open, the anticipation. There was a game in this a throw in this last game where it was an easy screen to Jerry Jeudy and turfed it. Jerry Jeudy had to make an acrobatic, weird contortion move to make a play on the ball. And I think didn't catch it. But you weren't seeing that with Brees. One of the things that made Brees incredible was it was like an extension of a handoff out there with how good he was at getting the ball to these players at the right spot at the right time, based on the right coverage too. Didn't even get into the pre-snap stuff that Brees has that we just haven't seen from Russell Wilson this season, with the Broncos struggling to get the play in and run it down to 0 seconds. Brees was up there with that unit, 15 seconds and making the pre-snap adjustments. So again, I think that's the idealized quarterback for Wilson, not how he's played. And the quick game is just night and day difference between those two.
Yeah. We got Garth Knight coming in saying, I think Russell Wilson and Harbaugh would actually get along, crazy as it sounds. You never know. Like you said earlier, they both are weird guys. So maybe that would be a bonding thing for them, that they try to be weirder than the other one. And it just becomes kind of a fun game that they have. And I'm not trying to say Jim Harbaugh is this guy nobody gets along with. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying he's one of those guys. He just knows who he is. And he's not going to change for anybody. And he's not going to try to be buddy just because you're the top quarterback or anything like that. That's kind of what I was trying to mean by that. So I do think he could find a way to get along with Russell Wilson. Part of it is, for me, with Russell Wilson, he's just so oblivious about himself. Harbaugh at least acknowledges, I know I'm weird. Russell Wilson, I don't think he knows that he's that weird guy. I think he thinks everybody loves this, and everybody thinks I'm just the coolest guy in the world. And they're going, oh my gosh, who is this? I don't know. I always kind of think of, I had a new kid move to our town, and nothing against homeschooled people, but he'd been homeschooled his whole life. And he watched us at an event. A friend came up and tackled me to the ground and said, hey, how you doing? And that was kind of our way of saying hello. And the stranger came up and tackled me to the ground, and he goes, hey, I'm Aaron. And I'm like, who are you? You just tackled me to the ground. I feel like that's Russell Wilson going, hey, that looks kind of cool. I'll do that. Sorry, some weird stories from my past. But anyway, like I said, I just kind of wonder a little bit of that. of how that dynamic would work. And maybe it would. It'd just be that perfect pairing. And we're looking back at this laughing, going, oh, yeah, we wanted Russell Wilson gone. And now he's back to his old ways.
Yeah. I mean, who knows? It might work out and it might maximize Wilson. Well, who knows if Harbaugh's coming? We'll find out more as this process goes along. But pretty wild times and unfortunate times for Denver. Back in the head coach. What'll this be? 3 head coaches in 3 years now. But it makes things interesting, and we got plenty to talk about here. So thank you guys for joining us today. Obviously, the press conference, you guys can check it out on the Broncos Twitter page and see for yourself. And we played some of the clips and talked about it. Before we do wrap it on up, any final thoughts, Carl, on this press conference today? Any words of wisdom or things that just you can't get out of your head?
I think the big one for me was the training staff part.
Okay.
Just that they're really going to look at that dynamic. And like you said earlier, that's one area you can throw as much money as you want at it because it doesn't count against the cap.
Yep.
And I think they're going to sit there and say, yes, this is an area that has to be fixed. We've been one of the most injured teams of the last about 4 or 5 years. And I think, unfortunately, I was excited about Lauren Lando when we got him, but obviously it hasn't worked out so far. And whether it's his fault or not, unfortunately, I think he is one of those guys that's going to have to fall on the sword too. And it'll be interesting to see how that group, because I think that'll be an underappreciated area that really gets upgraded this offseason.
Yeah, my big takeaway, this ownership group is going to pay big, and they pretty much everything is on the table that they're going to try to go and bring in a big-time head coach, and even to the point where George Paton, he's here right now, but he's already conceded some power. He's stepping back from this head coaching gig. This isn't his hire, and it has been his hire and his choice in the past. So things are shifting here, and it will be very interesting to follow how it changes going forward, because with that dynamic change, a lot more is on the table, in my opinion, because you can sell power now and final roster decisions and choices to this head coaching hire, rather than just, being the answer to, or having to answer to Peyton and having to placate to Russell Wilson. So going to be really interesting. And of course we always have one. Fire Elway. Elway's not been in charge here for a few years, but that's okay. Let's fire Elway. But appreciate you guys coming in here. I can't click out of that. It seems like my internet's all of a sudden going away. But make sure you're following Carl and I on Twitter. Carl is at Carl Dumler, MHH. I'm at Nick Kendell, MHH. Also, make sure you're following us at MHA Pod and at BFB_pod and at Mile High Huddle, of course. If you haven't done so yet, make sure you're following us at Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. And as the ticker says underneath there, please subscribe, like, and share. Carl, it's always good to hang out with you. I know that we've been hit or miss here this last couple months here, but good to have some normalcy here. Back in another head coaching press conference. Seem to have a lot of interesting news on Tuesdays that falls a good slot.
Yeah.
So appreciate you. Hope you're doing well. Hope everybody had a good holiday season, not just you, Carl, Scott, everybody in here. And steaming right ahead to the new year. Everyone have a great one. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. Go Broncos.